My daughter-in-law redecorated my living room as a surprise gift, so I quietly changed the locks the next day. But before I tell you about the click of that new deadbolt, let me tell you about the silence that came before it. The kind of silence that rings in your ears right after a bomb goes off. I was standing in my own front doorway, the key still warm in my hand from the lock, and I felt like I'd walked into a stranger's house. The first thing that hit me wasn't what I saw, but what I smelled. It wasn't the scent of my home, that familiar, comforting mix of lemon polish, old books, and the faint sweet smell of the rosebush just outside the window that my Robert planted for me. No. This was a sharp, chemical smell. The kind that stings the back of your throat. The smell of wet paint. My eyes finally adjusted to the dim light of the hallway, and I looked into my living room. Or what used to be my living room. The warm, butter-yellow walls that I'd picked out with Robert 30 years ago were gone. In their place was a cold, flat gray. The kind of gray you see on a battleship or inside a warehouse. It sucked all the light out of the room, made it feel like a cage. My big, comfortable couch, the one with the soft floral print that had held my children and then my grandchildren, was gone. A low, hard-looking thing sat in its place, another shade of miserable gray. It looked like something you'd see in an office lobby, not a home where people actually lived and laughed and cried. And the coffee table. My heart just seized up in my chest. Robert, my late husband, had made that table. He'd spent a whole winter in the garage, sanding and staining that solid piece of oak. You could still see the little imperfections where his hand had slipped, and I loved every single one of them. It was more than a table. It was him. It was his hands. His patience. His love. Sitting right in the middle of our life. It was gone. Replaced by a cold slab of glass on skinny metal legs that looked like a spider. My things, our things, were gone. The shelves where my mother's little porcelain birds sat were empty. The framed photos of my children growing up, of Robert and me on our wedding day, of my own parents, all vanished. The quilt my grandmother had stitched by hand, the one I kept folded over the back of the armchair. It wasn't there. The room was empty of me. It was like I had been erased. That's when she appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Tiffany. My son Michael's wife. She had this big, bright, triumphant smile on her face, the kind a cat has when it drops a dead mouse on your pillow. "Surprise!" she said, her voice all cheerful and loud in the dead quiet room. She threw her arms out wide. "Don't you just love it? I got it all done while you were at your sister's. It's so much more. Us. Us." That word hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. There was no us's in this room. This was all her. This was an invasion. I couldn't find my voice. I just stood there, clutching my purse. My whole body trembling with a shock so deep it felt like I'd been plunged into ice water. I think my mouth was hanging open. My son Michael came up behind her. He had that look on his face he always gets when he knows something is wrong, but he's hoping, if he doesn't say anything, it'll just go away. He looked from the room to my face, and he saw it. He saw the devastation. But he said nothing. He just stood there, a silent partner to this demolition of my life. Tiffany's smile faltered for just a second when she saw my face. But then it hardened into something else. Annoyance. "Oh, don't look so shocked, Gloria," she said, her voice losing its fake cheerfulness. "It's an upgrade. Your old stuff was so dated, you needed one. We needed one." She was telling me how I should feel about my own memories being thrown in a dumpster. She was telling me that the life Robert and I built in this house was just dated stuff. The silence in that house was heavy, like a thick blanket you couldn't push off. I felt my breath catch in my throat, a sob trying to fight its way out, but I swallowed it down. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of my tears. Not then. I just turned, without a word, and walked down the hall to my bedroom, the one room she hadn't touched yet, and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch was the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone completely silent. It wasn't always like this. Lord, no. When Michael first brought Tiffany home, I was so happy for him. She was pretty, full of life, and she seemed to make my boy happy. That's all a mother ever wants. I opened my heart and my home to her. I told her, "You're not a daughter-in-law to me, you're the daughter I never had." And I meant it. I really did. I taught her my recipe for sweet potato pie, the one my own grandmother taught me. When they were struggling to get the down payment for their first little apartment, I gave them the money from my savings. I didn't even think twice about it. A family helps each other, I told them. Every Sunday, they'd come for dinner. I'd cook all day, filling this house with the smells of roast chicken and collard greens, and we'd sit around that big oak table in the dining room and laugh. Those were good years. I thought we were building a family, a real one. But looking back now, with the wisdom that only heartbreak can give you, I can see the little cracks that were there all along. Little things you push aside because you want so badly for everything to be okay. I remember one Sunday, Tiffany was helping me clear the table, and she ran her hand over my dining room chairs. "These are sturdy," she said. But the way she said it, it sounded like an insult. Like she was saying they were old and ugly. Another time, she picked up one of my mother's porcelain birds from the mantelpiece. "I don't get why people collect this stuff," she'd said, with a little laugh. "Just more things to dust." I didn't say anything. I just took the little bird from her hand and put it back in its place. That was the first time I saw a flicker of something cold in her eyes, but I pushed it aside. I told myself she was young, she just had different taste. Then there was the time she borrowed a pearl necklace of mine, one that had belonged to my mother, without asking. I saw her wearing it in a picture she posted online. When I asked her about it, very gently, she got all defensive. "Oh, I was going to tell you. I just forgot. You never wear it anyway." Michael, bless his heart, he always tried to be the peacemaker. He'd pull me aside and say, "Mom, that's just Tiffany. She doesn't mean anything by it. Don't make a big deal out of it." And because I loved my son, and I didn't want to cause trouble in his marriage, I let it go. But every time I let something go, it was like I was giving her a little piece of my ground. And she was a woman who, once she had a piece of your ground, would start planning to build a whole house on it. The real trouble started about a year ago. Michael's company had layoffs, and his job was one of the ones that got cut. It was a terrible blow for him, for both of them. They were struggling to make their rent, and the bills were piling up. One evening he called me, his voice sounding small and scared, like it did when he was a little boy who'd fallen off his bike. He asked if they could move in with me. "Just for a couple of months, Mom," he said. "Just until I get back on my feet. Will be no trouble, I promise." What was I going to say? No? To my own child? Of course, I said yes. This house is big, too big for just one woman rattling around in it since Robert passed. I cleared out my sewing room, the room where I used to spend hours making clothes for the kids and quilts for the church bazaar. I packed up my fabrics and my patterns and moved my sewing machine into a corner of my own bedroom. We moved their bed and their dressers in. I told them to make themselves at home. I didn't realize at the time that they would take that invitation so literally. The first month was fine. They were grateful, quiet. Tiffany would even help with the cooking sometimes. Michael was out every day looking for work. But a couple of months stretched into 3, then 6. Michael found a new job, but it didn't pay as well as his old one. They said they were saving up for a new place, but I never saw any sign of it. And slowly, things started to change. The house stopped feeling like my own. It started in the kitchen. Tiffany would buy all this fancy food I'd never heard of and fill up the refrigerator, pushing my things to the back. She'd rearrange my spice rack, telling me it was more logical her way. Then it moved to the living room. My quiet evenings of reading in my favorite armchair were replaced by them watching loud reality TV shows. The volume was always cranked up so high the floorboards would vibrate. If I came in to sit, they wouldn't turn it down. They'd just kind of look at me, like I was the one who was interrupting them. They started having their friends over without asking me first. I'd come home from my garden club meeting to find a house full of strangers, drinking my iced tea and putting their feet up on Robert's coffee table. Tiffany would just wave a hand and say, "Oh, Gloria, this is so-and-so, we're just hanging out." She never introduced me as the owner of the house. She introduced me like I was the live-in help. The whole atmosphere of my home, my sanctuary, began to sour. The peace I had cultivated here for over 40 years was just gone. It was replaced by a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. I felt like a guest in my own life. I was always tiptoeing around, trying not to be in their way. This house, which had always been my place of comfort and security, started to feel like a territory I was losing, one room at a time. I'd see Michael's face, and he knew. He knew I was unhappy. But he was caught in the middle, and he chose the path of least resistance, which was to keep his wife happy. He didn't understand, or maybe he didn't want to understand, that in doing so, he was letting her slowly, systematically, push his own mother out of her own home. The redecorating, that wasn't the start of the war. It was just the final, devastating battle in a war I hadn't even realized I was losing. That night, after the surprise, I lay in my bed and just stared up at the dark ceiling. My bedroom door was closed, but I could hear them downstairs. I could hear the television, and then I heard Tiffany laugh. It was a loud, carefree sound that echoed up the stairs, and it felt like a slap in the face. They were down there, in that cold, gray room that used to be the heart of my home. And they were happy. They had won. The hot tears that I'd been holding back finally came. They streamed down my face and into my hair, silent tears of grief. I was mourning for more than just a room. I was mourning for my couch, for Robert's table, for the photos of my babies. I was mourning for the feeling of safety I used to have within these walls. I clutched the little framed picture of Robert on my nightstand, holding it to my chest. "Oh, Robert," I whispered into the darkness. "I'm so sorry. I let them ruin our home." I felt like I had failed him, failed the memory of the life we had built. I must have cried for hours. But as the first pale light of dawn started to creep in through my window, something inside me changed. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my gut, but something else was there with it. A cold, quiet anger. It wasn't a hot, screaming anger, it was something different. It was the kind of anger that makes you very, very calm. I sat up in bed and wiped my face. And I knew, with the certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I could not live like this. I could not spend the rest of my days as a ghost in my own house, watching my life get painted over in 50 shades of gray. I thought about going downstairs and confronting them. I imagined myself screaming, telling them how much they had hurt me, how dare they throw away my life's memories like they were trash. But then I played the scene out in my head. Tiffany would cross her arms and tell me I was being too sensitive. She'd say I was overreacting. Michael would stand there wringing his hands saying, "Mom, she was just trying to do something nice for you." They would turn it all around on me, make me the villain for not appreciating her thoughtful gift. They would tell me I was ungrateful. They'd invalidate every feeling I had, just like they always did. And I realized a fight was exactly what Tiffany wanted. It would give her more ammunition, another story to tell her friends about her crazy, dramatic mother-in-law. A loud fight would be playing her game, by her rules. And I was done playing her game. So I decided to play my own. I got out of bed, put on my robe, and walked quietly down the hall to Robert's old office. It's more of a storage room now, but his old wooden desk is still there. I sat down in his chair, the worn leather cool against my skin, and I opened my laptop. The house was finally quiet. They were asleep. In the blue light of the screen, I started to type. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for at first. I just typed what was in my heart. Family member won't leave my house. How to get someone out of your home legally. What are my rights as a homeowner? And then, the world opened up. I read articles from legal websites, forums where people told stories that sounded so much like my own. And I started to learn some new words. Words like tenant, guest, and licensee. I learned that a tenant is someone who pays rent and usually has a lease, and they have a lot of rights. You can't just kick them out. You have to go through a whole eviction process. But Michael and Tiffany weren't tenants. They had never paid me a dime in rent. We had no written lease, not even a spoken agreement about money. Then I read about guests. A guest is someone you invite into your home for a short time. But they'd been here for almost a year. The lines were blurry. But then I found the word that fit perfectly. Licensee. A licensee is someone who is on a property with the owner's permission, but they don't have the exclusive right to be there like a tenant does. They are there for their own benefit, not the owner's. A child living in a parent's home, a friend staying on the couch. They are licensees. And the most important thing I learned was this. A license can be revoked by the owner at any time. Once you tell a licensee their permission to be there is gone, if they don't leave, they are no longer a guest. They are a trespasser. I sat there in the dark, the words on the screen glowing. And I felt a power I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't the power to scream or to fight. It was the quiet, solid power of the law. The power of ownership. This was my house. Robert and I had worked our whole lives for it. My name, and only my name, was on the deed. I had given them permission to be here out of love. And they had abused that love. So I was going to take that permission away. A plan started to form in my mind, clear and simple as a line drawn in the sand. No drama. No shouting matches. Just a series of quiet, deliberate actions. Step 1. Call a locksmith. Step 2. Rent a small storage unit online. Step 3. Wait for them to leave for work. Step 4. Pack every single thing they owned. Step 5. Have the locks changed. Step 6. Send them one single final message. As the sun came up and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, I sat there with my decision. I won't lie to you, I was scared. My heart ached at the thought of what this would do to my relationship with Michael. I could lose my son. I could lose him forever. The rest of the family might hear their side of the story and think I was a cruel, heartless old woman who threw her own child out on the street. I weighed that pain, that possible future in my mind. And then I weighed the alternative. Staying here, in this house that no longer felt like mine, shrinking myself down smaller and smaller each day, until there was nothing left of me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I chose myself. I chose my peace. I chose my home. The next morning I got up and made coffee, just like I always did. When Michael and Tiffany came into the kitchen, I smiled. I asked them if they slept well. I wished them a good day at work. I was playing a part, and I think I played it pretty well. They didn't suspect a thing. I stood at the front window and watched their car back out of the driveway and disappear down the street. The moment it was gone, I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. And then I got to work. My first call was to a 24-hour locksmith. I explained the situation, calmly, and scheduled a technician to come at 3 o'clock that afternoon. He said it would be no problem. My second task was online. I found a self-storage place just a few miles away, rented a 10x10 unit, and paid for the first 3 months right then and there with my credit card. The confirmation email with the gate code and unit number popped into my inbox a minute later. Everything was in place. Then came the hard part. The packing. I started in their room, the room that used to be my sunny sewing room. I pulled out the empty boxes I'd been saving in the attic and started filling them. I was methodical. I folded their clothes neatly and placed them in boxes. I wrapped Tiffany's makeup in perfume bottles and newspaper. I took their pictures off the walls and laid them carefully on top of a stack of sweaters. This wasn't an act of anger, I didn't throw their things or break anything. It felt more like a surgery. I was carefully, precisely removing a sickness from my home. Every item I packed, every box I taped shut, felt like I was taking back a piece of myself. I worked all morning, fueled by a strange, calm energy. By noon, their room was empty, stripped back to the way it was before they came. Then I moved on to the bathroom, packing up their toothbrushes and towels. And finally, I went to the living room. Or her living room. I took down the generic, soulless art she had hung on the gray walls. I carefully wrapped the ugly metal lamp. I found a box of my old photo albums she had shoved into the back of a closet, and I sat on the floor for a moment, just holding them, tears welling in my eyes again. These were my real treasures. These were the things that mattered. As I was taping up a box filled with Tiffany's decorating magazines, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. My heart leaped into my throat. I saw Michael's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text message came through. My hands were shaking as I read it. "Hey Mom, Tiffany forgot her work laptop. Is it on the kitchen counter? We're turning around to come get it." Panic. Pure, cold panic washed over me. The house was a disaster. There were boxes and packing tape everywhere. If they came back now, it would all be over. The quiet plan would explode into the very screaming match I was trying to avoid. My mind raced. I looked around and saw the sleek silver laptop sitting right there on the counter. I typed back as fast as I could, my thumbs fumbling on the little screen. "No, don't come back. I'm just heading out to run some errands and I've already locked up. I'll drop it off at Tiffany's office for you on my way." I hit send and didn't wait for a reply. I grabbed the laptop, my purse and my car keys, and I ran out the back door, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I drove like a madwoman, breaking at least 3 traffic laws, I'm sure. I pulled up to the curb outside Tiffany's office building, ran the laptop to the security guard at the front desk, and told him it was for Tiffany Evans. Then I got back in my car and drove, taking the long way home, my eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. I didn't see their car. I had done it. I had dodged the bullet. When I got back to the house, the silence felt different. It felt safe. I finished the last of the packing and started loading the boxes into the back of my SUV. It took 4 trips, back and forth, to the storage unit. On the last trip, I took the new padlock they'd given me and snapped it shut on the unit's metal latch. I took the key, drove to the post office, and put it in a small padded envelope. I got home just before 3. The locksmith, a kind young man named David, was right on time. He was quick and professional. He replaced the locks on the front door, the back door, and the door leading to the garage. He handed me 2 new sets of keys. "You're all set, ma'am," he said. I paid him, thanked him, and closed the front door. I turned the new deadbolt. The sound of it sliding into place, a solid, heavy, satisfying click, was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of safety. The sound of freedom. The sound of my home becoming my own again. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down in the empty living room. The ugly gray couch was still there, a monument to Tiffany's arrogance, but it felt different now. It felt temporary. I sat there in the quiet, watching the afternoon sun move across the bare walls, and I waited. It was just after 6 when I saw the sweep of their car's headlights cut across the living room wall. I heard the engine cut off, the car doors slam. Footsteps on the porch. The familiar jingle of keys. Then, silence. A confused pause. Then the sound of a key scraping against metal, trying to find a home in a lock that no longer recognized it. More scraping, more frantic now. The doorknob rattled. My phone, sitting on the floor beside me, started to buzz. A call from Michael. I watched it vibrate, then go silent. A moment later, it buzzed again. A call from Tiffany. I ignored that one too. Then the text started coming, one after another, lighting up the screen in the dimming room. Michael. Mom, what's going on? The key isn't working. Michael. Are you home? Pick up the phone. Tiffany. Gloria, what did you do? Did you change the locks? Tiffany. This isn't funny. Open the door right now. I read the last one, and a small, sad smile touched my lips. Right now. The entitlement, the sheer audacity, even now. It was all the proof I needed that I had done the right thing. I took a deep, steadying breath. I picked up my phone. I didn't call them back. I didn't engage. I just opened up a new message and addressed it to both of them. My fingers moved calmly and deliberately across the screen as I typed out the words I had been rehearsing in my head all afternoon. Michael and Tiffany, I wrote. Your belongings have been packed and placed in a storage unit. It is paid for the next 3 months. The address is 123 Miller Road, the unit number is 47, and the key is in a small envelope taped to the back of my mailbox. The surprise redecoration of my living room made it clear that you see this as your house, not mine. Since I am the sole owner of this property, I have decided to reclaim it for myself. Your permission to stay here has been revoked. Do not try to contact me further. I read it over one last time. It was perfect. It was calm, it was factual, and it was final. I hit send. Then, I went into my contacts, found their names, and I blocked their numbers. I turned my phone off and set it on the floor. And in the profound, peaceful, and perfect silence of my own home, I finally felt at peace. The days that followed were strange. The quiet in the house was so deep at first it felt loud. I kept expecting to hear their footsteps on the stairs or the blare of their television. But there was nothing. Just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the sound of my own breathing. The gray couch sat in the living room like a tombstone. I couldn't stand to look at it. The day after I changed the locks, I called a charity to come and pick it up, along with the spider leg coffee table and the ugly lamp. Watching them haul it out of my house and load it onto their truck felt like a final cleansing. Slowly, I started to put my home and myself back together. I didn't have a lot of money, but I started going to thrift stores and little antique shops on the weekends. I wasn't looking for anything fancy. I was just looking for things that felt like me. I found a big, comfortable armchair, upholstered in a soft green velvet, the kind you can curl up in with a good book and a cup of tea. I found a sturdy, round wooden table to put my lamp on. It wasn't as beautiful as the one Robert had made, but it was solid and warm, and it felt right. The best day was when I brought the box of my family photos up from the basement. I spent a whole afternoon sitting on the floor, taking each one out, wiping the glass clean. There was Robert and me, so young, on our honeymoon. There were my babies, all chubby cheeks and big eyes. I hung them back on the wall, my warm, butter-yellow wall that I had repainted myself. And with each nail I hammered, it felt like I was putting a piece of my own heart back in its rightful place. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. The silence from my son was a constant ache. A part of me still grieves for the relationship I thought we had. But the peace that settled over this house, and over my own spirit, was a powerful balm. I learned that your peace is the most valuable thing you own. And your home is the temple where you keep that peace. Anyone who comes into your home and tries to tear it down, to paint over your memories and tell you who you ought to be in your own space, they are not respecting you. They are not loving you. And you have to love yourself enough to show them the door. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not to fight louder, but to quietly change the locks. Now, I have to ask you all a question. Have you ever had to choose between your own peace and keeping the peace with someone else? How did you handle it? I know I can't be the only one who's been through something like this. Go on down to the comments and share your thoughts and experiences. Let's talk about it. This is a safe space. If this story resonated with you, please do me a favor and give this video a like. It really helps more people find our little community here. And if you want to hear more stories from a woman who's seen a little bit of life, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for listening.